Today we're going to be learning the daf for Shabbat. Today's daf is Yoma Lamed Daled. We're going to start from the very bottom of Lamed Gimel Amud Bet. Evarim lemincha. We're going through this list. If you remember the order of when we do the daily activities in the temple, what comes first? So the parts of the body of the animal that we burn on the altar, the parts of the animal come before the mincha offering. Ditanya, as it says in a Braita. How do you know that nothing can come before the korban tamid of the morning? Talmud Lomar, meaning nothing else can go on the altar before. That's why we're going to put first this is the first thing, by the way, that we're putting to burn on the altar. So it's going to be first that, and only after the mincha offering. Talmud Lomar, where do we learn this from? It says in the verse, Va'arach aleha ha'olah. It says, and we put on it. Okay, let's read the whole verse. The fire will go on the altar. Lo tichbe'am in Vayikra Vav pasuk chet. Ubi'er alea kohen etzim baboker. Ba'arach aleha ha'olah v'iktir aleha chabei hashlamim. So the kohen puts the etzim on every morning. Already darshan that a lot, and then he puts on the olah, meaning the olah. What's the olah? The korban tamid. What do they learn here? Amarava ha'olah hi olah rishona. Okay, so it means that olah, meaning that's the thing that goes up first. Umincha lechavitin. So what do we say? Olah umincha. Okay, the pasuk says, why does the mincha come before the chavitin? Because the verse says, or why is the mincha next? Because it says in the verse, this is a different verse, in Vayikra Kaf Gimel in Parshat Emol, it says, the Eila Moadei Hashem, these are the holidays, etc. To bring sacrifices, olah umincha zevach unisachim. Okay, you bring an olah and a mincha, and the sacrifice and the nisachim and the libations. So now they say olah umincha. Notice first olah, then after the olah comes the mincha. That's next. So that's why it comes before the chavitin. Chavitin the nisachim. Why do the chavitin come before the nisachim? That's because shu mincha. They have the name mincha to it. So you might have thought mincha, right? We always say the minachot and the nisachim that go with the korbanot. We say that in our davening all the time. Minchatam v'nizkehem, right? The mincha offerings and then the libations. But we're going to bring the chavitim first because it's a type of mincha. So once we already have one mincha, we're going to have another mincha. Nisachim lemusafim. So then it says zevach unisachim, right? That pasuk said zevach unisachim. So the nisachim come next. And then after that, we do extra sacrifices. Umusafin lebizichim. Okay, the hatanya. Now they say, what about the musafin lebizichim? Why do they come before the bizichim? The hatanya, bizichim kodmin lemusafin. They say, wait, but it says in a braita, the bizichim come first. So the answer to Nahi, it's actually a debate, a Tanaitic debate, which comes first, the bizichim or the musafin? Amar Abaye, mistaber kamad amar musafin kodmin lebizichim. It seems more logical to say that the musafim come first. Why is that? Lav mi amrat baboker lakdim. Didn't we say baboker in yesterday's daf means that you're supposed to do this first? It means it's early in the morning. Hachanami bayom la'achel. So if you look at the verse about the lechem, about the bizichim, it says bayom Shabbat. You're supposed to put, right, these are the bowls of frankincense that go with the lechem atamid. It says bayom Shabbat. Bayom appears twice. Bayom sounds like if boker, morning, means early, then bayom means later in the day. So therefore, that must come after the musaf. So hachanami, my time in demanda amar bezichin kodmin lemusafin. So what about the opposite logic? Where do they get it from? The opposite opinion, that the bezichim go before the musafin. Kamar chuka mechavitin. If you look in Rashi, quotes the verses. By the chavitin, it says chok olam. And by the bizichim, it says chok olam. So they both say chok. So because of that, we're going to learn the chok of the bizichim from the chavitin. And the chavitin come earlier, so we're going to do it earlier. What's the problem? Well, if you want to do it like the chavitin, then do it with the chavitin. But we had mincha, chavitin, nisachin, bizichim. So it's not exactly like the chavitin. So if you can learn from chavitin, do it all the way. So they say, well, on the one hand, you want to make it earlier because of the chavitin. On the other hand, we have bayom, which makes it sound like later. So let's just do it one later, not two later. We'll do it after the nisachim, but not before the musafim. Remember, the Musafim are extra sacrifices on holidays or Shabbatot or Rosh Chodesh. So now they say the Ktoret comes between the blood and the Evarim. Okay, so now they say, Mane, Rabbanan ben dam lenerot mebayale, which really should be ben nerot lenerot mebayale. It should really say here, not dam lenerot. So they're saying the Ktoret comes in between the blood and the body parts of being burnt. But they say this doesn't match Rabbanan, doesn't match Rabbi Meir. We've seen this machloket. Remember the machloket? Is the Ktoret in between the candles, right? The two sets of candles. Rabbanan, it should be ben nerot lenerot mebayale. Okay, it should be between the candles and the candles, not between the dam and the evarim. And Abba Shaul, who said that it's the Ktoret goes after the nerot, then it should be ben nerot le'evarim mebayale. It should be candles, Ktoret, evarim. So it doesn't sound to work like either of them. So the answer, no, la'olam rabbanani, u'besidra lo kamari. They weren't so careful about the order. Now it is still in order because according to the rabbis, what do? We do first the blood, then we do the candles, the first 5, then we do the Ktoret, the incense, then we do the last 2 candles, and then we do the evarim. So it is technically speaking between dam and evarim. It's just between, after the dam and before the evarim, we have all the candles. So it's like 1, 3, 5, right? If we do the order, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 1, 3, 5. So it really is in between, and that way it works. The Ktoret in the afternoon was done between the evarim and the nisachim, okay, as opposed to here where it's done before the evarim. So they say, Menani Mili, where do you get this from? We're going to have these confusing verses which talk about the daily sacrifices in Bamidbar, Kafchet, Zayin, and Chet, just talking about the sacrifices of the Korban Tamid. And in Pasuk Zayin, let's just read both verses first. That's how much you're supposed to bring for the libations. Lekeves ha'echad, for 1 sheep or 1 lamb. B'kodesh hasech nesach shechar la'Hashem, so do it in the kodesh. You do the nisuch. Okay. Et hakeves hasheni ta'aseh ben ha'arbaim, and the second one goes in the afternoon. It's done like the mincha of the morning and the nisachim of the morning. Now, even though this seems to be sounding like the first verse was talking about morning and the second was afternoon, we're going to see that some people think the whole context here is afternoon, okay? And that the whole thing is actually discussing in the afternoon. So let's read now. Let's read further on. So now they say, Rabbi Yochanan says, the pasuk says, Ki minchat haboker u'kiniskot ta'aseh. So ma minchat haboker, that says you do it like you do it in the morning. So what do we know about the morning? In the morning, Ktoret kodemet l'nesachim. First you do Ktoret, then the nesachim, the libations. Ma minchat haboker Ktoret kodemet l'nesachim. Afkan Ktoret kodemet l'nesachim. So just like in the morning, Ktoret then libations. Likewise in the afternoon, Ktoret then libations. But then they say, wait, if you're saying the order is the same, then ima lahalan Ktoret kodemet le'evarim. In the morning, first you do the Ktoret, then you do the evarim. So afkan Ktoret kodemet le'evarim. So then you should say, just like in the morning, the Torah goes before the Evarim, you should have the same thing in the afternoon. And in fact, it's not true. In the afternoon, you do the Evarim and then the Torah. So how do we explain this? So now they say, Miktiv ke'evrei haboker. It doesn't say do it like the Evarim in the morning. It says kiminchat haboker. Do it like the mincha in the morning. And therefore, kiminchat haboker v'lo ke'evrei haboker. And therefore, don't worry about learning the Evarim. We're not supposed to learn them for the morning, only the afternoon. Tanu Rabbanit. Now we're going to deal with what I was saying before. There's a little confusion about which verses are these verses talking about, the first one or the second one, the morning or the afternoon. V'niskol revi'itahim. So they say from here we can learn Yomad Shacharit Mishel Arvit. We're going to learn Shacharit from Arvit. Now you would have thought from the simple reading, it sounds like we're going to learn Arvit from Shacharit, which is the next opinion. But the Braita here, Tanakama says, no, we learn Shacharit from Arvit. See in a minute how he gets this. Rebbe Omer Arvit Mishel Shacharit. Rebbe says, no, we're learning the afternoon from the morning. So, Bishlama Rabbanan, we understand Rabbanan, Hai b'tamid shel ben ha'arbayim k'tiv. Okay, they say that verse must have been talking about Ben Ha'arbayim from the afternoon. And therefore, they're going to say, since it was referring to the afternoon, we understand why he says we're going to learn morning from afternoon. Ela Rebbe my time, but what's Rebbe's reason? So Amar Rabba Bar Ula Amakra, the keves ha'echad. It does say keves ha'echad, which means morning. Ezu keves shneimar bo echad. What's the keves that says it means echad? You can read that echad as one or the first. So the way the Tanakama read the verse was, v'niskor v'itayin lekeves ha'echad means the one in the afternoon, and then we can learn from there to the one in the morning. But Rebbe says no, lekeves ha'echad is referring to the one that's referred to back in Shmot as et hakeves ha'echad taseh baboker, which is the first one. So that's ezehu keves shenemar bo echad, which is the one that says one. Hevei omer zeh tamid shel shachar. It's the one of the morning. V'Rabbanan ma echad. So what do Rabbanan do with echad if they think it actually means afternoon? Miyuchad shebe'edro. It's the teacher. You're supposed to take the most special one and use it for the sacrifice. To which the Gemara asks, the Rebbe, where does he get that from then? If he doesn't get it from here, because echad to him means morning, so where does he get that from? Me'uvichar nidarecha. There's a pasuk in Dvarim in Deuteronomy chapter 12, pasuk 11, that says, when you get to the place that God chooses, you should bring your olot, your zvachim, your maser, all that, b'chol mivchar nidarechem, and the best of your nidarim, meaning bring the best animal. So you don't need another verse to say it here. What will Rabbanan say then? Why do you need a verse also? Rabbanan cha b'chova b'cha b'nidava. Okay, so you need one for a voluntary offering and one for an obligatory offering. So here when it says echad, it means miyuchad because it's an obligatory offering. And the Gemara says utzriche. And it doesn't tell you why you need both, but Rashi says, yesh tzad notesh anidava tzarich liyapota k'jet shetitratzeh l'ratzon v'kabalat panim. So you might think that when you're doing something voluntarily, you need to make sure it's really good so it will be accepted. And that you should, when you pay up your obligation, you should do it with the nicest. So one could see logic in both ways, and therefore you need it for both. Now we're back to this last part of our Mishnah, which said if the Kohen Gadol is elderly, or he's very particular and it's hard for him to go in cold water, you put in something hot, whether it's hot water, we said, or maybe some heating element, which we're going to talk about right now, and that takes out the chill. So Tanya, we're going to see a braita. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, ashashiyot shel barzel hayu mechamin me'erev Yom Kippurim. They would use these hot metal, trying to think of the word, but a hot metal, ashashit, like a, let me look up the word. Okay, see a block of iron, okay? A block of iron, hayu machamim me'erev Yom Kippurim. We're going to see the fact that it's a block is very important because it's not really a utensil, which is going to be relevant later on. So they would warm this up from before Yom Kippur, umetilim letoch tzonen, and they would put it into the cold water, kedei shetafik sinatan. To which the Gemara asks, how can you do that? Halom mitzaref. It's a halachic problem to do that on Yom Kippur because you're doing the action of mitzaref. How do they translate it? Right, when you kind of put something, right, it hardens the iron. Right, you put in something very hot, metal into cold, it hardens it. Right, as opposed to when it's heated, it gets softer and then it hardens in the water. And that's forbidden because that's basically the way you fix a utensil. Right, the last thing you do is to harden it. So Amar Rabivi shelo higia letziruf. It must be that it wasn't hot enough that it didn't actually harden it. Abaye Amar filu tema shehigia letziruf. I'll explain it even if you say it did. Because what will I say? Very famous. We learned in Masachet Shabbat. Davar she'ein mitkaveh mutar. It's something you didn't intend. Right? When you don't intend to do an action, and it does a malacha anyway, right? You intended to cool off the water. That's allowed. In the process, something else happened, which was forbidden. But that is not a problem because Rabbi Shimon says, Davar she'ein mitkaveh mutar. That's Abaye. To which the Gemara questions and says, Mi abar Abaye hachi. Does Abaye really say this? Vahatanya doesn't say in a braita, besar or lato, in a different topic. When you do a brit milah, circumcision, and let's say the baby has a leprous spot right there, and you're not allowed to cut off leprous spots. It's forbidden by Torah law. But when it comes to a brit milah, you're allowed to do it. So they ask, They say, afilu b'makom sheyesh sham beheret yikotz, and we learn it from Basar or Latot, Divrei Rabbi Yoshia. Ve'havinam ba kcha lama li. They ask the question, why do you need a pasuk to include this? They say, it's davar she'eino mitkaven. You're not intending to cut off the leprous spot, so it should be allowed. To which they answer, Amar Abaye, Rabbi Yehuda damar davar she'eino mitkaven asur. You need the verse to tell you, because Rabbi Yehuda thinks that davar she'eino mitkaven is forbidden. So therefore, you need a special verse to teach you. In this case, it's allowed. So now they say, so it seems like Abaye holds davar she'eino mitkaven is forbidden. So how could you say he holds it's the only way to explain it was to say it's permitted? So they say, Torah kula, aval hachat seruf derabanan hu. Because this is all, so we're going to say now, when he said davar she'eino mitkaven is forbidden, that's if it's a doraita law, like cutting off the baheret. But if it's midurabanan, which here it's durabanan, why? Because the ashashit, the block of iron, was not a utensil. It's only a problem when you're creating a utensil. This isn't considered a kli. It's not a utensil, and therefore it's okay. Because in a durabanan, we're going to paskin davar she'eino mitkaven is mutar. That's according to Abaye. Okay, that's his way of reading. New Mishnah. Hevi'u lebeit haparva. So he finishes doing all the morning daily activities, and now we're going to go do the avodat Yom Kippurim. So they bring him to the Beit HaParva. Ubekodesh Haitan. This was in the sanctif, right? This is in the Azara. Persus Sadin Shel Butz Beino Lebein Ha'am. Remember, they again put up this sheet, this linen sheet. Kidesh Yadav V'Raglav U'Pashat. Remember, we had a big machloket about this. So he washes his hands and then he takes his clothes off. Rabbi Meir Omer Pashat Kidesh Yadav V'Raglav. First he takes his clothes off, then he washes his hands and legs. Yarad V'Taval Alav V'Nistapag. He goes into the mikveh, he gets out, he dries off. Heviu Lo Bigdei Lavan. Now they bring him the white clothing. Lavash V'Kidesh Yadav V'Raglav. Now the Mishnah continues, and you think this is a halachic kind of Mishnah. But in Mishnah Eretz Yisrael of Safrai, it says this clearly isn't a halacha. Okay, it's not that type of section, even though we're going to see there's a machloket Rabbi Meir and the rabbis. And they're going to discuss how expensive were the clothing that the Kohen Gadol wore on that day. And they're going to show that he even wore a different outfit in the morning and in the afternoon. B'shachar haya lovesh pilusin shel 12 mana, ben ha'arbaim handuyin shel 800 zuz. In the morning, he would wear fancy pilusin clothes. Okay, it's a type of linen that was worth 12 maneh. Now, 12 maneh doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a huge amount because a maneh is 100 zuz. So 1,200 zuzim's worth of clothing. That's very expensive. And in the afternoon, handuyin, it's another type of garment that was 800 zuz. That was worth 800 zuzim. That's Rabbi Meir, Divrei Rabbi Meir. Now, clearly this is exaggerated Mishnah. And we'll see in a minute. Let's just keep reading. He says even more. It was 1,800 zuzim. And ben ha'arbaim in the afternoon, it was 1,200 zuzim in the afternoon. Hakol 30 mana. Altogether, it would be 30 mana, which is 3,000 zuzim. That's a crazy amount. Not only that, Elu mishal tzibur. This comes from public funds. Imagine, right? So much money on these clothes, right? Very expensive. V'im ratzah losif, mosif mishalo. If he wanted to add, he could add his own. Okay, so now we're going to talk for just 1 minute before we end about this idea about the clothing and what's going on here. So Safrai basically talks about a few things. He says, number one, this is one of those exaggerated Mishnahs, and they're trying to just say how glorious things were in the time of the temple and how everything was just extravagant and beautiful. And again, there's always that balance between waste of money and also wanting there to be beauty in the temple, and things for God are always going to be as great as they, right? We're going to make them as beautiful as we can be, as we can. So that's maybe one way of looking at this. Again, it's exaggerated. They certainly didn't spend this kind of money. What's this idea about Mishal Tzibor? So Safrai basically says, if you remember, we've seen all these sugyot about how it can't belong to you. Right? We saw this in Shkalim. You have to give it over to the temple. If you bring your own, you have to say, I'm giving this, it belongs to the temple. In fact, they use the machatzira shekel money to buy these fancy clothes. So he claims that there was, in the time of the Cheshmonaim, there was a big breach between, right, we know about the Tzdukim Prushim, and the Tzdukim really tried to have ownership over the temple. And the Prushim said, you don't own this place. And the Stukim wanted to spend their own money on things. They were wealthy and they wanted to use their own stuff in the temple. And the Prushim said, no, this is our temple. You're representing us. And therefore, everything has to be from communal funds. You can't claim anything in the temple as your own. And that's part of this big debate about everything being Shel Tzibur, was the Prushim's way of saying, this all belongs to us. We have a part of this just as much as you do, even though we're not all Kohanim. And even though most of the Kohanim are Stukim. So it's, again, this power struggle between them. And that's what is possibly going on here with this idea about there being Shel Tzibur. It's interesting that they do let you add some of your own, which is a big question how they could do that. It has to be belonging to everybody. But on the other hand, they do say it was used from communal funds, and that way they didn't claim any ownership rights, that the temple belongs to us. Okay, with that, Shabbat Shalom or Shavua Tov.